I'm going to sort of start because we've got a very packed programme. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to everybody, and no doubt there'll be people joining us as we're going along. So just enjoy. Try and switch your brains on a little bit if you can. It'd be lovely. And then if you can put your cameras on, that would be even better. But I completely understand if you don't feel comfortable doing that. So that's absolutely fine. Right. So it is now 2 minutes past 12, and we are about to embark upon a couple of hours of trying to think a little bit differently. First of all, I just want to explain why we're here. So the University of Exeter Business School is very proud of all of its alumni, and any opportunity we can get in order to get you together or to help you in any way, that's what we're here for. So the reason why we've set up these talks today, hopefully this is going to be the first of one that we will be having on an annual basis, is to bring together the alumni from both the MBA and the Management Masters, International Management as it was in the past, in order to give you the opportunity to reconnect with one another, to reconnect with us, and also to hear from some really amazing speakers who are doing some fantastic work out there in the real world. So today we are going to be focusing on two people. The first speaker we've got is Dr. Becky Sage. So she's going to talk to us for 20 minutes between 12 and 1. And then we'll have 20 minutes to put you guys into breakout rooms so we can chat with you a bit more and pick up on these ideas that Becky's going to give us. And then in the second half of this session today, we've got Cath Bishop, who Jackie's going to help introduce, etc. So that you know who we both are, I'm Dr. Claire Dinan, Programme Director for Management MSc, International Management as it was in the past. And we've got Jackie Bagnall here, who's the Programme Director for the MBA. Okay. Along with that, we've got the careers people who help on both those programs. So we've got Liz Robertson is here today. We've got Claire Guy is here today. Dominic is the careers coach for the MBA, who will be around and about. Okay, so that's basically the format for how we're going to go. So what I would like to do right now is introduce Becky Sage to you. Becky has very kindly given up her time today in order to talk to us. She's going to be sharing her insights into the future of quantum science. I have no clue about physics. I can't even help my daughter with a GCSE physics, so this is going to be interesting. And then she's going to be talking to us about how that's going to affect the way in which we approach work, sport, education, and beyond. And then we'll go into, she'll talk to us for 20 minutes, and then we'll go into some breakout rooms. So Becky, it's over to you, and welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you to everyone for inviting me here today. I'm just going to share my screen. As I'm doing that, I want to say, don't worry, this is not a science lesson, although I have said that there is a tiny bit of physics in the middle. And we are, in fact, going to be looking at kind of how the thinking that goes behind quantum thinking is something that we can apply to leadership. So it's something that as individuals we can really kind of take on ourselves and think about it for ourselves, hopefully a little bit more. So it'll give us food for thought. And I'm really interested to see what's going to come out in the breakout rooms. So, like I said, I'm really excited to be sharing this shift in perspective that makes leadership more sustainable, more flexible, more ready to deal with uncertainty. By shifting my perspective, I've been able to reduce stress, have more fun in a leadership role, and focus on the positive impact I want to make. What's this leadership style? It's quantum, baby. So before I explain further, I'll do a bit more of an introduction to myself. I'm Becky Sage. I've spent 15 years working in science, technology, and entrepreneurship. Initially in academia, where I achieved a PhD in chemistry in 2008. Following a number of roles working in business support and community building, I joined the founding team of Interactive Scientific in 2014, taking on the CEO role shortly after that. For the last 18 months, I've been more of a non-executive role, which has allowed me to take on other activities, including teaching organizational talent here at Exeter and teaching entrepreneurship on other masters, PhDs, and professional training programs. And I've also just become Director of Acceleration at Educate Ventures. In addition, I'm the host of a podcast called Mindstyling for Entrepreneurs. So recently, one of my main areas of interest is how we create inclusive cultures in entrepreneurship, leadership, and STEM. And I know firsthand the apparent tension between the general challenges of business and the need to create positive cultures in our business. And I say the apparent tension because as I've shifted my worldview, I've been able to recognize that what I previously saw as a tension is actually an opportunity for positive change. And it's always been my perspective that's needed to shift in order to see the value in the challenges and make better decisions. So I've always been involved in the future of work one way or another. My career has been defined by future gazing, as I'd put it. I've worked in the space of innovation and disruptive industries. And for that reason, technology has also always played a major role. As the CEO of an edtech company, I had to create immersive science learning tools, and I saw the opportunity of technology to do two things: to make science more accessible for a wider range of people, and to make sure that our science education is fit for purpose for the world that we live in. So in this role, it was really imperative that I was responsible in the decisions that we made. I wanted to ensure that technology that we developed was ethical. I wanted to ensure that our educational approaches were progressive and inclusive. And I wanted to ensure that our tools were kind of truly a leveler. In addition, I had to find a business model that would work, which is challenging in that space, because the context for building the business was an education system that's incredibly fragmented, where only private schools can really afford the time and money to invest in edtech. And it's a fairly immature market that was often difficult to understand and articulate. You've then got to add on the challenges that so many entrepreneurs and leaders face, such as difficulties amongst team members, constant fundraising. Needless to say, I was overwhelmed. Now, I was trying to build a pretty complex business, but it's actually not unusual for impact businesses to be that complex. And one of my biggest mistakes, probably throughout my career actually, was always trying to impose a tight structure and control, and to try and fit in with the advice that people were giving me about how to run a general business, rather than kind of giving me slightly more nuanced advice that was going to help me through the complexity. Now, all of us are only experiencing an increasing level of an uncertainty and tension, both in business and in society. So, and we can't even continue to think about business and science, society as being these two separate things. We've got to start thinking of them as being all part of a whole. The Foresight Conference back in 2019 described Society 4.0, which is the society formed in response from the Fourth Industrial Revolution, as a quantum society, where polarities, conflicting narratives, conflicting identities coexist. And they posed this question: can quantum governance or quantum organizational design be developed? And since then, I've discovered that there's been a lot of work going on to answer that question since the 1990s. If we can build quantum organizational design, then in theory, we're better equipped to deal with uncertainty, complexity, conflicting ideas, and we can actually learn how to thrive in those situations. So this idea of a quantum society is a way for us to boldly step forward as leaders in the 21st century. So to understand how to move from quantum thinking, we have to have an understanding of the influence that science has on our worldview. Now, back in 1687, this is the science history part, Newton published Principia, which was often described as the founding of classical mechanics. It was groundbreaking, and Newtonian physics is now applied widely through science and engineering. It also helped form a wider worldview. The ideas that were coming from science were influencing the way government, business, individuals thought about everything that they did. Now, as individuals, all of us carry our own worldview. And that's a selection of principles and values that influence the decisions that we make. Our worldview is determined by the influences that we have. So, and that includes the prevailing scientific thought. Now, if your physics learning stopped at school, like so many other people, the likelihood is it never moved past Newtonian thinking. And that has a major impact on the worldview that we carry. Since 1687, science has moved on, surprisingly. There's a universal agreement that Newtonian approaches can work for a really small subset of the natural world, but they're far from the complete picture. And the introduction of quantum science, plus relativity and chaos theory, gives scientists a far more complete way of describing our universe. However, the prevailing worldview in leadership, especially in bigger, more powerful organizations, is taking much longer to catch up. So when I talk about Newtonian thinking versus quantum thinking, what am I actually talking about? Newtonian thinking is beautifully simple, actually. And we've all heard the terms in business or management, KISS, keep it simple, stupid. So on first glance, Newtonian thinking is great. It's about finding simple ways to describe things, about having a set of laws that apply to well-defined controllable systems. And it's atomistic, so that means it keeps each component in a system separate and uncontaminated by one another and the outside world. The Newton's Cradle, which is a common office toy, and you can see it in this picture here, is made up of separate hard balls. First one gets pulled back, and then it generates momentum. Then it neatly passes that momentum all the way down the chain until it reaches the last ball. The last ball takes the energy, and it swings up to the highest point before gravity and air resistance cause it to slow down, turn around, and pass the momentum back along the chain. It's a very kind of clean, law-abiding system. And we know eventually it will slow down and stop, but even that's predictable. So it's very appealing to us in leadership positions to want to create systems like this. We set up a structure, it's defined by a set of rules, each component acting independently and predictably, allowing us to transfer value from the business through to our customers and back again. Quantum systems, on the other hand, are complex. They appear to be chaotic and unpredictable. And in fact, as stated by Dana Zohar, who's the author of The Quantum Leader, they thrive on uncertainty. A quantum system is also holistic. It treats the system as a whole. In a quantum system, we're no longer thinking about a number of separate entities. We're thinking about systems that are completely connected. So if you're listening to this thinking, I'll stick to my Newtonian way of thinking, thank you very much, all this chaos and uncertainty does not sound like much fun, you're actually not alone. You might recognize this person. Einstein, one of the main contributors to quantum theory, said, "Quantum theory is a system of delusions of an intelligent paranoiac concocted of incoherent elements of thought." He developed quantum theory, but he never came to like it. He spent most of his life trying, but failing, to disprove quantum theory. He helped to develop it. He didn't like it because uncertainty, chaos, unpredictability are uncomfortable. But newsflash, uncertainty, unpredictability, and chaos is what reality is made of. I don't think there is anything on this slide that I actually need to explain to anyone here, but we live in an uncertain world. From the global pandemic to climate change, racial and gender inequality, mental health challenges, increasing polarity between the rich and the poor, the increasing control of the 1%, global tech. I'm talking of technology. There's such an opportunity with technology, but there is ever increasing uncertainty as well. In fact, during 2020, The Guardian ran this headline: "After coronavirus, we should be ready for an uncertainty pandemic." Now, Alvin Toffler, way back in the 1970s, wrote about future shock, the paralyzing effect of rapid change. And we run such a risk from an uncertainty pandemic. But we have a choice. We can bury our heads in the sand, we can choose to ignore it, we can run away, we can freeze as we're inflicted by such future shock, or we can try to learn from a system that thrives on uncertainty. And so quantum thinking becomes a slightly more attractive prospect. And quantum theory only applies to the very, very small and the very, very fast parts of our universe. Think about subatomic particles and light waves. However, we would not be sitting here today if it wasn't for quantum processes. The most obvious reason for that is because the sun would not shine without quantum processes. It also exists throughout biology and in almost all modern devices, including our smoke detectors. Quantum computing is yet to be fully realized, but when it does, the technical changes are going to really going to be so much greater than anything we've seen over the last 20, 30, 40 years. You know, the most recent technical changes will seem like child's play compared to quantum computing coming on board. So if quantum underpins life as we know it and thrives on uncertainty, perhaps as leaders we can learn a thing or two from it. Okay, are you ready? Here comes the science part. I'm going to take you through a whistle-stop tour of some of quantum's phenomena. Although I wanted to stress this before we start, it's a quick reminder from Richard Feynman, who was one of the 20th century's foremost scientists and one of the most incredible science communicators. He says, "I think I can safely say that nobody understands quantum mechanics." So, you know, if there's anything that is not understandable, don't worry too much. As we move into this next part, I want to kind of remind you again that I'm using quantum phenomena as a metaphor for us to learn from. I'm not suggesting that all these quantum phenomena work in the same way at macroscopic scales. Otherwise, we'd be able to do things like teleporting, and you know that might be in the future, but that's even more uncertainty, right? So we'll stick to just using it as a metaphor for now. So let's proceed. As uncertainty is a major theme in our lives, we'll start by looking at the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which says there's a fundamental limit to what you can know about a quantum system. The better you know the momentum or the speed of a particle, the less well you know its position. So the more you focus on trying to understand one part of a system, the less potential you have for understanding a wider part of that system. The other thing to say about this is that the observer, the particle, the system as a whole, and these different properties of a particle are all inextricably connected. Changing one thing changes everything. So the key message here is that everything is connected. That's what we can take away here. We'll move on to the next phenomenon, which is wave-particle duality. Now, with wave-particle duality, it says that quantum entities can be both waves and particles. And a set of experiments were done that showed that if we measured an electron one way, it would behave like a particle. And if we measured it another way, it would behave like a wave. So the question that we ask matters. If we ask through an experiment, is this electron a particle? It's a particle. If we ask the question, is this electron a wave? It's a wave. So as the observer, we have the power to change a system. This is known as the observer effect, and it's a major part of quantum theory. It says when you observe a system, you fundamentally change it. So that's something for us to take away with us as well. Following on from that wave particle duality phenomenon is also this idea of both and. So you might have heard of Schrodinger's cat. It's a mythical cat. It's stuck in a box with a vial of poison and some radioactive material. If the radioactive material emits a particle, the vial will break, releasing poison, and then the cat will die. But we don't know when the vial will break or if it will break. And so we don't know if the cat is dead or alive. In quantum systems, it's said that if the box is shut, and we don't know if the cat is dead or alive, then the cat is actually both dead and alive. In fact, in a quantum, any quantum particle can exist in what's called a superposition of many states. It can be many things all at once. Now, we know that wouldn't be true of a real cat, but the fundamental idea for us to take away here is that two things can be true at the same time. There can be multiple potential outcomes, and we won't know the outcome until we observe it. And then perhaps the most exciting quantum phenomena, and the one responsible for many applications, is quantum tunneling. This is the reason the sun shines. Quantum particles can overcome energy barriers that should be impossible to overcome. So one way of thinking of this is, if we're trying to push a ball over a small hill, we don't push it hard enough, maybe we don't actually push it at all, but somehow it ends up on the other side of the hill anyway. But this happens completely unpredictably, and it's illustrative of emergent behavior within a complex system. So we might not be able to predict it, but when it happens, it changes everything, including making the sun shine and allowing life as we know it to exist. So now we've completed the world's quickest quantum theory lesson, I want to apply some of these ways of thinking to us as leaders in organizations. So in a quantum organization, looking at the system as a whole is incredibly important. And it's also important for us to recognize that as leaders, we're an integral part of the system. We're not on top of it. We're not the only thing holding it together. We're not pulling the system along. Quantum leaders are part of a quantum organization. So how can we use this idea that everything is interconnected in our business or in our work, shaking off the idea that we're a group of individual, discrete beings? We focus on connections, on creating environments that allow connections to thrive, the connections between people, but also between people and product, people and ideas, people and the world outside our organization. Our job is to create the safe spaces that allow the self-organization to occur through these different connections. There's also an idea about leading at the edge. So all of this is not about just throwing away any structures, but it's making sure that those structures are not so fixed and brittle so that they can adapt and make space for something better or something unexpected to happen. The next thing is about being able, when we observe a system, we change things. Now, as somebody who's spent a lot of time working in education, I'm really familiar with the fact that the mode of assessment we use completely determines somebody's learning experience. And this is the same in business. What you measure matters. What you measure gets managed. So you have to think very carefully about what should and shouldn't be measured. So it's not just what should, it's what we should stop measuring as well. Are you heavily focused on what we might call vanity metrics, whilst ignoring some of the other things that might be important to the development of the business? So you can think about what questions you're asking. And I say business, you know, this can be any role that you're playing, but what questions are you asking? How can you measure in a way that encourages positive values-driven growth? Now, this idea of two things coexisting at once. Getting the idea of this kind of both and way of thinking, which is as opposed to an either or way of thinking, is actually a really tricky shift. Like, I find it quite hard because of really we're quite trained to be very linear thinkers and to see kind of a right answer or a wrong answer. But this mindset shift can really positively impact the work we do in our lives in many different ways. So when we build teams with diverse thought, so different ways of thinking, it can be really challenging because different perspectives can bring about conflict. And that conflict, if we're thinking in an either or way, can be quite scary, and it's something that can be difficult to be dealt with. However, we don't need to fear it because it can lead to deeper, more nuanced understanding of problems if we've got a different perspective on it. And of course, if we've got a more nuanced understanding of problems, it's then easier to solve those problems. Shifting to a both and perspective is also useful when you're planning, you know, especially at these uncertain times, which I argue is always. Instead of making very fixed plans with just one outcome, we can do things like use lean approaches and methodologies, which allow us to ask one question at a time, allowing a solution or an outcome to emerge without being imposed. In this case, having your values, your vision, your purpose is what's going to keep your team moving in the same direction. And then on to the last point here, unexpected and unpredictable situations can feel like quite a scary thing. And we know over the last year in particular, unexpected and unpredictable things have really meant life has been difficult. They can also be where we make positive quantum leaps in our lives, in our work. I bet we can all look back at a time and see where we met just the right person or had just the right idea at exactly the right time. There's all sorts of other scenarios you can conjure up. And so whilst it's always great to have some level of prediction, if we try to be on top of everything, our stress levels go through the roof. And they often are. I think this is often what's responsible for us being stressed and kind of leading to these times of burnout even, and very difficult times. When we tell ourselves that we can't know everything, we let go. We begin to trust the system. So we can get smarter about building, like I said, the lean processes, being more values driven, and put that into our business practices and have this culture of learning along the way. So we need to kind of plan for spontaneity and ensure that our cultures are built for growth, inclusion, and continual learning. So now I've just given you a lot of information, a lot of things to think about. It's now time for the hard part, which is putting the theory into practice. I think it's about having the humility to know that we don't have all the answers. And sometimes we need to have courage to go against the prevailing thought when necessary. So can you be curious, humble, reflected, a connected leader who looks after themselves as a whole person and recognizes that others are whole people too? Can you create space for great things to emerge and to ultimately best serve other people and the planet? This is what we all strive to be as a quantum leader. So now I go over to you. I have got some questions here which you can discuss, but I know that Claire, you're kind of going to lead the breakout into some rooms, and there's going to be a number of people facilitating the session. So of course, wherever your conversations go, is fine. I think we're going to have about 10 minutes and then we'll come back into the main room. But Claire, I'll hand back to you.
Becky, thank you very much. And I managed to follow all the physics.
Yes.
Good God, what brilliant. Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting and a very dynamic way of being able to look at things. So thank you very much. We've been talking about wicked problems and about Cynefin framework and complexity and complex and simple and chaotic in the stuff that we've been looking at recently. So that it fits really brilliantly with that. Thank you so much. Okay, so we've got some time now to go into breakout rooms. So we're just about to evaporate into various breakout rooms. During that time, if you'd like to think about these points or how it makes you feel, that would be great. And we'll come back in and have a bit of a chat. Thank you. Thank you all very much. We had a lovely conversation in our group. It was fascinating. I wondered if we'd just like to go back to Becky now. Has anybody got any direct questions for Becky before we sort of close up on this part and then we move on to the second? Anybody got any direct questions?
Or I'd love to hear kind of if there were key points that came out as well, any key discussion points, even if they're not questions.
I'll volunteer one from our group if that's any use. It was great. We had one of our alumni in our group who's currently working for Exeter. So it's interesting to see, you know, how particularly this type of thinking, particularly for a company like Exeter, who's clearly, you know, tech embedded, etc. Yeah. To see how this is going to work going forwards. And we were learning about the fact that, you know, particularly with Accenture, they're thinking that they might not necessarily be centralized anymore. They might be more distributed in the way in which they've got different working hubs, etc. And then those conversations, how they happen and how things flow. Yeah. So I just wondered if you had any more to add to that, Becky, around other organizations you might know of that are rethinking how they might structure themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is pretty widespread, this idea, and whether it's going to be realized or not as all the lockdowns kind of come out is still to be determined. But there's I've had some really great examples of quite a few companies now that are really allowing the kind of key people across the teams to be the ones that drive the activity around how do we kind of keep connected, keep the cultures moving. So again, it's this kind of idea of self-organization, I guess, and allowing those who really feel best placed to be driven to make sure the connections that are happening to be the ones that kind of to drive that forward. And I've worked with quite a few companies who are doing that in that kind of grassroots way. So from a leadership perspective, it's about permission and allowance, and essentially kind of finding some self-selecting people. So you might kind of pose the question of you know, how do we still connect when we're working in a more disparate fashion? And yeah, allow people to self-select and come and be part of those conversations, but ensuring that they're then facilitated to drive forward into some action, but that it doesn't become that top-down, this is how we should do it, because, you know, I think we all kind of realize that those things don't always work, especially in these slightly more uncertain circumstances.
Yeah. Has anybody else got anything that they wanted to add, or any other, just in case I'm missing anything on anybody might have had a burning question they wanted to put to Becky, or an observation?
Hi Claire, so I can share some feedback from our group. So it was great, thanks for the talk, Becky, real food for thought. And our discussions were very much about the workplace of the future, and I mean that future literally being 6 months away, 12 months away. And your point about a sense of belonging, how are we going to create that sense of belonging in this disparate workforce? And I guess what can we learn from those that have already been doing this for the past year or two?
And I think so this, you know, I know we hear this a lot in business now. When we think about purpose, we think about values, and we think about those being the sticky things, I suppose, the things that do give you a sense of belonging is being kind of driving towards some kind of purpose. But I think it's so important that, particularly when we do values work, that it is not just a list of words up on a wall somewhere that someone has decided. I think when we think about values, it's really important to that there is buy-in, and that we get that, and there's also understanding, a collective understanding of what is meant by those words and the behaviors associated with those words. So yeah, I can see you nodding. I'm sure this is something that you've talked about a lot with people, but it's how we behave, how we act, how, you know, not just paying lip service to those words. So and again, and I think that again comes down to safe spaces, creating spaces, creating space full stop, you know, making sure that there is time set aside for these kind of conversations, but also making those, that there is, as I've used the word permission quite a few times, I think, and this idea of people feeling like they have permission to be contributing, to be giving their perspectives, to be part of these conversations, because I think that then builds this connectedness, and that sense of belonging, or it can help to build that.
Becky, thank you very much. That was really, really, really helpful, and I will carry away many of the ideas that you raised in your talk. It was really, really helpful. It connected up a whole load of things for me, which I never knew physics would enable me to do. So you know, brilliant way of thinking of things. I think one of the things for me as well is, and it links very much with what Cath is about to come and talk to us about, is the whole cultural part of that. Because if you're talking about people offering opinions, being part of conversations, etc., they have to be brave. And you know, Cath is going to talk to us about the cultural obsession to do with winning and how it affects the way we approach work. And you know, lots of people might not feel that secure in themselves or brave enough, or competitive. They don't want to be part of that competitive environment where you've got to be constantly trying to get your point across, which is where that whole Newtonian system might have worked a little bit better for them.
Exactly, yeah, and being able to, some of this comes down to that, like we are what we measure as well, and it's what is success to us, and how do we just, you know, how do we decide what success is, and is that coming from us or is it coming from somebody else? And obviously we didn't have time to talk a lot about the importance of looking after ourselves and kind of creating ourselves as this this leader that kind of knows themselves and is able to look after themselves through the journey. But I think that's a big part of then being able to step up and maybe go against the grain or show some of this courageous leadership as well.
Brilliant. Becky, thank you so much for your time today. It's been incredibly helpful, and I would love to, you know, work with you again and see you again in the future. That's fantastic. So I'm going to pass over to Jackie now, and Becky and I can relax, and it's over to Jackie and etc. going forward. Thank you so much. Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, Becky. Lovely. Thank you. And we are just so delighted today to have two keynotes. I mean, we feel kind of spoiled and a little bit greedy, but it's great. So thank you. So as Claire said earlier, I'm Jackie. I'm the Programme Director for the MBA. And our next guest speaker is Cath Bishop. Cath, I can give you a wave. Hello, great to see you. Cath is a 3-time Olympian, world champion and Olympic silver medalist rower. She held a career as a diplomat before her current role as coach, consultant and adjunct faculty member at Judge Business School in Cambridge University. We are delighted. One of my favourite reads right now. And Cath, I'm going to invite you to share with us your ideas for about 20 minutes, and we'll do the breakout rooms again to discuss those ideas and an opportunity to connect back to Cath afterwards. Over to you.
Lovely, Jackie. Thanks for that warm welcome, and lovely to be here with you all. And I could see the topic just leading right into me there about how do we define success? Because I have always been fascinated by this question of what does success look like? What are the criteria that I need to fulfill? What's really expected of me? And it hasn't always been what I thought it was to begin with. So actually, before I kind of launch even further, I'd love to actually ask all of you, connect a little bit. When I talk about what does success mean, can you share on the chat for me a word, a phrase? How would you sum up what success looks like for you at the moment as a leader or whatever, as a studying at the business school, whatever that might look like? I'd love to have a bit of a language and a feel for what pops into your mind when I ask, what does success look like? So great, we get that happiness word comes straight in, Claire, being proud of personal efforts, pride. Oh, that's wonderful. Share a few more with me. Great. Oh, learning. That's a theme that I think's already come up with Becky, that's going to be very much part of what I talk about as well. I love all of that language coming in because you're giving me some really decent success metrics here. And as Becky just sort of said, what we measure is what we get. So if these are the things that really drive us, we need to make sure that we're connecting what we do and defining success on our own terms. When I started off in the sporting world, I thought that, success is just about winning medals. How can it be about anything else? It's so simple in sport. It's so wonderfully simple. And yet over time, over the 10 years, the 3 Olympics I went to, I realized that performance and being part of sport, the purpose of sport is something much broader than just a moment crossing the line or just a moment on the podium. What happens before that moment, what comes after that moment, are actually the really important part. What does that medal signify? What do you take from that medal into the rest of your life? That's the really interesting story that matters when we're thinking about success in sport. I remember then when I was a diplomat, I thought, okay, this time I need to be thinking success is about being really smart and clever and drawing on my academic background to understand the history and politics of a country. But when you step inside the negotiating room, then very different factors become important in how that negotiation actually proceeds. It matters how we connect, the relationships we create within that room, how we can understand others' perspectives and find a way together to collaborate, to create together a new space, a new way forward, probably and potentially that has never been tried before. That's very different from purely how smart you are understanding the history and the politics. As a parent, I'm still working out what the hell success might look like, and I think that's going to take a good deal longer. But I'm really aware that within the education world, within the schools world, what determines success for my children seems to be very narrowly set. It seems to be a small set of outcomes based largely on how good their memory is on lots of different factors. And yet my work now in leadership development, consulting and teaching on business school programs around building teams and creating leaders, memory doesn't seem to be that critical a skill. In fact, most things can be Googled and looked up. And actually what we need to do is, as Becky was talking about, we need to be managing uncertainty. We need to be able to be creative. We need to be able to reflect, collaborate, and again, create and innovate in ways that haven't been achieved before. These are very different skills from what my children seem to be being measured on and viewed as successful or not accordingly. Winning is everywhere. You can look at adverts and you'll find people trying to sell you a winning hair product or advertising, a winning way to set up a company. You'll find that in the Hollywood videos, the Hollywood films, they love a winner too, often a gladiator, often a kind of a warrior that we see and that we grow up with. A lot of stories around that. Most of the history books tell us who are the winners and the losers, and yet they leave out so much. Winning is around us, and yet what I found when I delve deeper is that the simple picture that we often see really doesn't tell us the deeper story of what's going on. If you look in the business world at the moment, there are many successful people, and yet I have interviewed some of those, spoken to some of those, read about many who feel disengaged, who feel that their work life actually doesn't have a purpose, who feel burnt out maybe. We see huge examples of, in the most extreme cases going back to the financial crisis, somebody like Fred Goodwin, who is described universally as a serial winner, who wanted to make the next acquisition and the next acquisition and the next acquisition until, in fact, he presided over the largest corporate bailout in British history. that's not really what winning looks like to me. In sport, I've been perplexed as well. I mean, surely winning, getting to the top step of the podium is everything. Everyone else along the way generally discarded as not having made it. We don't invite people who haven't won medals to talk to people at school, to talk to children at school. We only invite the winners, because somehow, are we telling our pupils at school that everyone's going to win a medal if they go into a competition? I'm not quite sure what the narrative that we're feeding in is there. But I looked around me and I saw quite a few winners in sport that didn't seem to be the picture of success that I thought. When they arrived on the top step, they didn't feel lifelong fulfillment and that all of their dreams had been met forever. Even going back into history, we see countless examples. Mark Spitz, who won 7 gold medals in 1972 at the Munich Olympics, he struggled to ever find a life after that when he realized that the effect of winning 7 gold medals wouldn't be lasting. Chris Evert said that the high of winning Wimbledon lasts about a week. Then what? Andre Agassi talks similarly about how when he finally won his first Grand Slam, finally won at Wimbledon, he suddenly realized the chimera of winning, that winning changes nothing. Johnny Wilkinson, the hero of the England World Cup winning rugby team in 2003, somebody that we have always looked up to and seen as the ultimate sportsperson, has in recent years been talking about the mental health challenges that accompanied on that journey. How he thought that each cap, each title, each trophy he chased would solve his issues, would bring joy. But in his own words, the joy never came. Then there's the darker side of sport, the fact that somebody like Lance Armstrong, held up as the ultimate hero, actually cheated in order to come first. These are images of winners that are not a picture of success that I would want to emulate, that I would want the next generation to want to emulate. So I think we need to look deeper at how we're defining what winning means, at what success looks like in the workplace. What is it that we really value around us? Whenever we define success in a way that is short term, the next quarter's results, the next race that we want to win, then the danger is that we will do things that won't serve us well for the long term. We need to make sure that success is defined over a perspective that includes both today, when there's no results coming in, there's no outcomes, there's no race that's to be won. How do I make today successful? And how do I feel that today connects through some of those short-term milestones and metrics to something that has a longer-term purpose? It's stretching our definitions, the perspective of them, and the quality of success. The contribution we make, so one of the words that Jude kind of brought into the answer to my question there, that sense of contribution. Have we made a difference in some way? It's quality, not just quantity, that probably plays the bigger role in how we think about success. For me, I really went on a journey to challenge some of this through those 3 Olympiads that I was training as a rower. When I first joined in the mid-90s, long time ago now, when I first joined the Olympic rowing team, it was all the mantra. It was all about who is the winner, who's the toughest, the strongest, the meanest, the last person standing. Who are the people who have the will to win? And there was all sorts of judgments made. I heard coaches, I heard established athletes talking about, yep, so-and-so's a winner, so-and-so isn't. And I thought, hang on, we're all at the level of being part of a British Olympic team. And yet suddenly we're now being put into these categories of who's got the will to win. And I thought, oh my goodness, have I got the will to win? How do I know? What do I do to find that out? What if I haven't got it? What if I thought I have, but I haven't? Or what if I haven't got enough of it? And all the time I was caught up in that web, in that narrative. I wasn't going any faster. I wasn't developing myself as an athlete. I wasn't developing mental or physical skills that would help me to perform. I was stuck in a pointless narrative that went nowhere. It was only in the latter stages when sports psychology started to become more prevalent from 2000 onwards that I realized there was a whole different way of framing this pursuit of winning. I mean, no one could be more dedicated than I was to trying to win. and the performances didn't come. So I started to realize after my second Olympics, I'd come 7th in the first Olympics, 9th in the second Olympics. You know, I'd gone slower for doing 4 more years of training 3 times a day, about 2 hours each. So 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, 49 weeks of the year. I'd done 4 years more of that and come off with the worst results. So clearly I was missing something about what performance really involved. And sports psychology came in and helped me a lot. One of the things that sports psychologists have started to separate out are the concepts of performance and results. We all want those results. It hasn't changed, and that's fine. But results are in the future and they are affected by external factors. For us in sport, they may depend on how fast our competitors go, the weather, injuries, umpires, referees can come into play, or in 2020 and 2021, we may not even know if the competition is going to happen or not. Lots of uncertainty there. But we as an athlete, therefore, can focus instead on the things that we can control, the things we can improve, our performance. That's what we need to invest in. If we can improve our performance, we'll optimize the best chance of getting that winning result, but we can't guarantee it. It's the same in the business world. It's the same in the working world, that actually we will want to get promoted and we'll want to have great profit results and all of those metrics we're chasing, but they will depend on a lot of external factors. All we can do is optimize our approach as part of a team or the teams that we belong to and fully focus our attention on those things. To separate these out, the psychologists would help us also to build a sense of success on a daily basis. Now, I know if success in the future might look like going faster than the rest of the world in a boat on a beautiful sunny lake with thousands of people watching and millions watching on TVs, how do I connect today? A chilly day in March when I'm not even sure if I'm going to be selected yet, but I need today to be a successful day. There's no outcomes, there's no medals at the end of today, but I need to optimize my improvement if I'm going to have any chance of getting close to having a crack at that day when the Olympics come, of delivering my best performance and seeing where that puts me. So we look at all of the things within that final performance that are needed, the performance ingredients, if you like. And that involves some obvious stuff, the technique, the fitness, the endurance and power that I need. But it also involves some less obvious things. It involves a lot of mental skills, communication, collaboration, recovery, good nutrition. All of these need to be optimized. Some of these are easy to measure, some of these are less easy to measure, but they all affect performance. So I'm interested in all of them. Some of them will take a long time to develop. You know, whether I communicate well or not, that may not determine how fast I go in my next race in 3 months' time, but it will determine if I am able to really work in a team and optimize that performance that I bring in perhaps 2 or 3 years' time. So I need to invest today in communication. Even if I can't see my boat go faster tomorrow because of it, I know it's a crucial element to performing in due course at my peak. So we start to build up a picture of daily success ingredients, if you like, defining success for ourselves in all of the areas that we can improve. We try and become world-class at improving, not world-class at winning. But that's not because we don't want to win. We still want it. But our best way of getting close to that is to maximize the improvement piece, the learning piece, something that I know Becky spoke to you about, something that several of you have mentioned as well, is really key to our picture of success, because that's what happens in between, before and after the results we get. We just carry on learning. And we would have that approach to give us a resilience and to avoid going on the roller coaster of a high when the results were brilliant and a low when we lost the race. Do you know what? Every time we raced, we learnt. And we would always look at what's going well, what do I need to improve, what am I going to do differently next time? And we did that regardless of whether we won or lost. Because if I've won a race and beaten the rest of the world, well, do you know what? I need to go faster next time if I want to try and repeat that. I need to look for ways to improve, and I need to look at what's working and what I need to improve. Even if I've beaten other people, there are areas to improve. I want to get good at learning. And if I've lost the race and been beaten by everyone else, do you know what? There were still things I did brilliantly. I lost races where there were elements of my technique, there were elements of what I did that was world class. It would be madness to throw those out when actually those are the basis on which I can start to add further improvement in the other areas that weren't yet world class. So getting good at learning gives us resilience, gives us that sense of constant momentum forward, even though results will vary, and they'll sometimes be good and they'll sometimes be less good, and they are defined by all of these other external factors. Let's maximize our own improvement. Let's make sure that success is defined in terms of what are we learning, what are we gaining, how are we improving on a daily basis, and a whole range of ways that are important to us that we want to develop in. I can remember before I went back for that third Olympics, the psychologist said to me, what are you gaining from this if you don't win a medal this third time round? I thought, my God, you can't say that. That's heresy. We're in a world, it's all about medals, and I haven't got one, and I still want to get one. But his question was brilliant because it released me from thinking about that medal for a moment. It totally released me. And I started to think about all of the things I was gaining. I was gaining, experience in being part of a team. I was learning about myself enormously, the mental and physical boundaries that I was exploring each day. I was learning about how to manage pressure. I was learning about how to communicate with others in a way that enabled me to bring the best out of them and them out of me, and learning how to challenge each other at the same time. All of these things would be of benefit and of value to the career or whatever happened in life after sport as well. It gave me that sense that I was developing skills that were useful beyond what I was doing. And when I put focus onto those things as well and acknowledged them and recognized them, they improved more and they fed into the rowing performance too. That was the beginning of my performance starting to improve, of me starting to get onto the podium, because I had this much broader perspective on delivering my best performance and allowing the result to sort itself out. I can only do what I can do in order to improve. I can remember on one occasion when I won a race, sort of coming towards the, in that final part of my career. And afterwards, we were so happy. We were at a World Cup regatta in Munich, and we had our gold medal. And the coach afterwards said to us, great result, girls. Tell us about the performance. And initially, we were just really, really happy about, we've won. It feels so good after all this time. And he said, yeah, it's a great result, but tell me about the performance. And we went around this loop a couple of times and he was getting frustrated with us. And then I realized he was asking us something different. And then we started to answer it. And he said, well, it's explained how the warm-up had gone, the things that had worked, the things we might want to tweak for next time. We discussed the race, how we'd started off, and the 3 things we'd wanted to focus on. 2 had gone really well and 1 hadn't quite come off. So we need to explore what happened there and look back on the video. We'd had a good stroke length, the right number of strokes per minute that we'd aimed to do, and we'd started to move away from the field. Halfway through the race, the wind direction changed and we lost balance, we lost our rhythm, we started to stutter, and the other crews were catching us up. We tried a couple of things that didn't work, and then when we focused on our posture, that was the key to us rebuilding the rhythm again. We were able to maintain our distance out front, and the scrabble at the end of the race, the sprint to the line, was a bit messy, but we got away with it. But if we don't clean that up, if the waves are any bigger next time, we could come a cropper. Oh, his face was just full of joy. He said, great, that's what tells us all of the ways in which we can go faster next time. The result tells us none of that. And yet I see in a lot of my work this obsession with the spreadsheets, with what the results are, and as if looking at them more will help them to change. Actually, we need to understand the team performances that are going on behind that, the experiences we're having within those teams, the leaders, the way that we're leading and enabling us to develop all of the performance ingredients, not just the very few things that are easy to measure. That experience throughout my rowing career really set in train what's become the long win for me, the long win thinking approach of defining success on our own terms in a way that we can constantly develop and improve, and in a way that's really defined for ourselves, by ourselves. It's not imposed by others. It's not about a single moment in time when we cross the line. It's not a short-term piece either. The 3 C's that make up the long win, the themes of these are clarity, constant learning, and connection. And I think all of those you'll have tapped into as well from some different angles in the previous talk. Clarity is about clarifying our values, clarifying the things that matter, not just simply what gets measured. It's clarifying my picture of success today, the how, the way I want to turn up today, not just the to-do list of tasks to tick up, but how I want to influence others, how I want to interact with others, how I want to connect and learn and explore in every interaction, meeting, everything that I'm doing. I want to clarify the bigger, longer term purpose that I'm part of. Why am I doing what I'm doing? I want to connect to that and bring that into the everyday. The second theme of constant learning, well, we've heard about that with Becky. And again, it's that mastery mindset that the more I learn, the more there is to learn. I just keep learning. I keep exploring. I keep innovating, experimenting. And that's what allows us to manage change. If we're constantly learning and developing and growing, then that actually enables us to manage the world around us that's growing and developing at a frighteningly fast pace. Learning sits at the heart of how we can develop our performance. It's the fuel of performance. It's what leads us to then optimize the results that come in due course. And the final one of connection is about how we prioritize human relationships in everything that we do. In both the sporting world and the diplomatic world, relationships sat at the heart of what we did. We wouldn't dream of going out to race against the rest of the world without understanding each other at a much deeper level than simply just wanting to go fast. We needed to know why we were doing this crazy life of training 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, 49 weeks of the year. We needed to understand our strengths and weaknesses and how we could play to those. We needed to challenge and support each other. In the diplomatic world, again, our whole business was based on relationships. I actually think all of our worlds are based on relationships. But the wonderful thing was it was so obvious in diplomacy that we were able to prioritize them. We were able to think about how we developed them, influenced others. What were the things that would help us to connect at a deeper level? Before I went on my first posting to the beautiful city, capital city of Sarajevo in Bosnia and Herzegovina, about 10 years after the collapse of the former Yugoslavia, I had a conversation with a very wise and eminent ambassador. I wanted to get his advice. I wanted to learn from him. And I thought he might give me a bit of a geopolitical lecture about the history and the politics of the Balkans, all very complex stuff I'd been reading up about. But he didn't. He said, the most important thing is going to be how you connect with people here. It doesn't matter whether they're the Prime Minister or the ambassador or the taxi driver. These people will give you an insight into the life, the culture, the experiences of this country that will always be of huge value. You have to find a way to connect with people. And he said, there are 3 tips that I give. There are 3 things that I think about if I'm trying to get a connection at a much deeper level, not transactional, temporary, but at a much deeper level. He said, firstly, find out who they are beyond their job title. It doesn't matter if they're a minister of education or a political advisor. It doesn't matter. Find out actually what drives them, what gets them up in the morning. What are the things that, as you said, constitute success in that more meaningful way? What are the things that are really important? Find out that stuff beyond the CVs, as I think about it in the workplace. If I'm working on a team, I always want to know who I'm working with, not in terms of what their educational opportunities have been, but what makes them tick, what excites them, what challenges them, what are the things that they really need in order to be at their best. Find out who they are beyond their job title. The second factor, in order to achieve that, is to listen more than you speak. Listening is one of our most powerful, influencing, persuading tools that we have. Listening and more listening and listening again enables us to get deeper and deeper into the connection with the person we're with. It's how we build trust. We will never persuade people through the sheer power of our argument, the logic, the rationality behind it. That actually entrenches people further away from us. However good our plan is to solve this crisis, we actually need to make sure that we understand the perspectives of the people that we are talking and negotiating with, that we can see the world through their eyes, and only then might we be able to bring them slightly closer to our view of the world. The third thing, once you've found out who they are beyond their job title, you've listened more than you speak, then build on what you have in common. It's often really obvious in that world. It was very obvious what we didn't have in common. There were political, historical, cultural, linguistic barriers. But always look for what you have in common. There will be something, he told me, you just have to find it. And that was my challenge in Bosnia, in Iraq, in all of the work that I was engaged with around the world, to find something in common, because that's where you'll start to get some progress, something new, explore a new area together, a new collaboration, a new way of co-creating a step forward for the country, for the issue, for whatever it was that we were talking about. All of these three themes, the clarity, constant learning, connection, have been a huge part of how I've come to redefine what success means for myself, for my family, for the work that I do now in organizations. And I've found these themes always to be immensely useful when working with others, when trying to create a new framework in which we can thrive, in which we can really explore our potential better together. I'm going to pause there and hope that I've given you lots of food for thought to take into the next breakout.
Wow, have you? That was amazing. I want the Weetabix that you had this morning, Cath, because that energy was fantastic. Thank you. Right, we're going to have another opportunity to connect to each other about what you've just heard on. What does that make you reflect, and what are your thoughts and ideas? So we're going to go back into 3 groups. They're going to be shaken up, and we've got about 15-20 minutes to have some conversations, and then we can come back and ask Cath some questions. Wow, the energy in that breakout room was amazing. Thank you all so much. Right, Cath, gosh, you opened up a whole series of great things here. Would anyone like to make a comment from their discussions, ask Cath a question?
I'm dying to hear, what were the themes? What were the themes?
I'm happy to contribute something from our group. I had a lovely collective group of 8 of us. Every single one of us a paid up member of the introverts group, which meant that one, it tied really well with Becky's lead-in, but 2, everybody was very good at volunteering to listen. Lovely. So it was a case of having to ask some really quite targeted and open questions to get people to start thinking about what success meant for them, what it looked like for them, etc. So I wondered if you'd then be able to develop on that for us, Becky, given the fact that you were a diplomat and you had to connect with people and get them to talk, how would you have done that?
So, lovely question. You need time and space. Yeah. I think we all want to be heard. Often, I think there's a difference between not wanting to speak in a group and feeling an introvert. That still means you want to be heard. You might want to be heard actually in a smaller one-to-one situation. I think we actually all, regardless of introversion or extroversion, we want to feel safe. So we come back to that question of psychological safety. We need to know that we can fail, that people are genuinely curious. I think there's something about, if you listen to what comes and just give that space, then usually more does come. We can also just sort of spend time with people in different ways. So it doesn't always have to be kind of pure like verbal communication. There can be, I want to come and watch how you work. I want to come and watch how you do something. I want to come and learn. A coaching approach, if you like, not a, that sort of asking those curious questions is, I think, a good way to go, but we don't want to bombard people with questions either. I think sometimes it's almost about, this is what I'm curious in, and what can you share here? Or can you tell me some stories about this? Has this ever happened? So we're thinking, not about who's the smartest, who's got the smartest answer, but we're actually looking for those sort of human stories about when have you had a time when this might have happened, and then just creating the space to listen, or just the space to kind of almost be with somebody in whatever endeavor they're doing. Definitely sort of in the diplomatic world, people would, you had to tailor your approach all the time to find the way of connecting, and that was almost the joy of it. What worked here won't work here. So we start again and we explore and we uncover and find a new way.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a final question or a final point that I'm going to do a draw? I'm going to get Cath to pick 3 numbers and we're going to give away 3 copies of her book. Would anyone like to make a final point on this, on the issue of success?
I don't mind. We were talking a little bit about perfection selection and the idea that it's expectations that cause us to evaluate success, and that success should really be not about where you come from or where you're going or who you are and what you've done, but just being a better iteration of your former self. And I would just like to ask you on a personal note, at what point do you feel like you had your aha? I'm better than I was before.
Yeah, no, I love that. You're right. Sort of expectations are a kind of key issue that gets sort of imposed, or things we think we should be judging as success. And just sort of before I kind of answer the personal element there, it reminds me of the sort of research that's been done about medalists on the podium. And you would think that the gold medalist would be happiest, the silver medalist be next, the bronze medalist be sort of third happiest. That seems logical. But actually, when they've looked at interviews and, you know, analysed people's faces and you know, what they say around that moment, actually, the bronze medalists are often the happiest. The silver medalists are the least happy, and the gold medalists are often a bit sort of flat. And you think, God, how is that? What's happening there? And that's all tied up with expectations. The gold medalists going, you know, oh, yeah, I wanted to win. Oh, it's happened. Oh, well, is that it? Because often it's not then connected to well, now what? You know, well, what does that mean? Or, you know, again, you know, often there's that sense of relief rather than unfulfilled, you know, everlasting joy. The silver medalist is comparing themselves to gold, and they're going, "Oh my God, I'm one off." You know, it's the most painful thing. You know, I've loved the first loser with all of that macho narrative that echoes in our heads potentially from the playground, all those films we watched. And the bronze medalist is going, "I'm so glad I didn't come fourth." So our expectations can colour our experience. It's nothing to do with the colour of the medals. It's all to do with how we compare ourselves to those expectations we have. So, you know, for me, the biggest aha was really that sports psychologist coming in and saying, you know, what are you gaining if you don't win? What are those things that you're learning? You know, why else are you doing this? What else is going to be part of this? And even if you do win, what will you take with you, you know, when you step off that podium? So that bigger kind of framework really to thinking, actually winning needs to, you know, a moment in time needs to be attached to something of kind of deeper and ongoing meaning that relates to what went before and what comes afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you for that point, Sophie. Wow, that was amazing. I've got 3 C's of clarity, connection, and constant learning. I've got 3 fantastic points about who is the person, listening and deep connections, and what we have in common. There's just so much to take away there, Cath. Thank you. Before I let you go, please could I ask you to give me 3 numbers?
Yep.
1 and 32. So your first number is...
Number 2.
Number 2. Your second number is
31.
31, and your third number is
22.
22. Great. I feel like somebody needs to release the balls, but it's
yes, exactly.
Josh, can you just give me 3 names, please? So who was at number 2?
Number 2 was Jen Palmer Violet.
Oh, well done, Jen. Who was at number 22?
That is Thomas Ashcroft.
Well done, Tom. And who is at number 31?
Sophie Locke.
Well,
the last questioner. Great.
We'll find a way. We'll drop you an email. We'll tell you how we're going to get the book to you. That was great. Please, could you unmute yourselves and join me in a round of applause for Becky and Cath for what was my stimulating lunchtime. Thank you. We'll make the recording available. It'll go out to all of those people that booked. It'll sit on the MBA YouTube channel, but keep the conversations going. Tell us how you get on. You'll find us on LinkedIn. You'll find us on Twitter. But Go well and go safe. Really great to see you. Thank you.